Imagine that you work at a synthesizer company. And one day, your well meaning boss comes in and says, "We want to design a new drum machine. It's got to be as good as the 808 and 909, have as long lasting an impact, but sound completely different. Off you go." Can you imagine having that job? Because I can, and I think I would just slowly weep, a tear rolling down my face as I realize that I've been set the impossible task. Because if you think about it, the 808 and 909 are 43 years old at this point, and these sounds are not going away. And you could well ask a question, why? And more's the point, what is the modern version of the 808 and 909? What is a new sound set that is as indelible and permanent and always great as that? What is it? I'll leave you to think about that, because the answer is very, very hard to define. I think it's a really interesting question to ponder, because we start to question why the 808 and 909 have endured for so long. Were they perfect? Were the sounds perfection? Can the sounds be improved in any meaningful way? What is the point of their use? What does their use imply? Because in some respects, you could say that the use of the 808 and the 909 is a nostalgia aspect. It is the same sounds that are in records that we may have grown up on, that we love, that are part of musical history, that are genre defining. So the experiences that we have associated with those sounds can be called up on a whim and put into your track. You can have the same drum sounds that are in Selected Ambient Works 85 to 92, not actually an 808, but an R8. But you can put them in your track and you can evoke some of those same feelings because they're indelibly associated with the sounds. And that is powerful and it is real. But there is huge scope to change their sound. One of the things that must be stated, a really funny one actually, is also when people try to make other drum machines, they try to make their own versions of things, or they make, Arturia make a drum machine, Electron make a drum machine. I see comments on the internet where people say things like, this doesn't sound very good, or, of someone's kind of digital 808 clone, for example, oh, that doesn't sound as fat and badass as a real 808 or what have you. And I think it's really important to remind yourself that what you are hearing on a record is a thing that has been both affected, mixed, and mastered. You are hearing a much, much more processed version of the raw sound of the machine. And it may surprise you to hear a kind of a dry 909 and a dry 808 without any additional processing, compression, analog warmth, being, gone hard into a Mackie, being slightly driven by a tape recording or tape simulation, as it may be. But we process drum machines. And actually, it's important to state that part of, I think, people's lack of acceptance of new drum machines comes from the fact that they are not hearing them processed. I remember I was at the distributor for Arturia and the Drum Brute was released, the original Drum Brute, which is a very soft sort of, it's more in the realm of the CR-78 than it is the 808 and the 909. And that was a perfect example of seeing people's reaction to it. And a lot of people like shitting on it because they thought, well, this just doesn't, basically, I can distill our arguments. It didn't sound like a 909 and 808. And that's what you have to contend with if you're going to create a new drum machine. How much or not much like an 808 or 909 is your drum machine? Because if it isn't like that, then you can be prepared for people to not like it because it sounds alien. It doesn't sound like a drum machine is supposed to sound. And this is the other thing. There's the influence of those drum machines are so absolute that any new machine is judged against them, when that may not have been the design goal, to make a thing that was like them. In fact, it may have been to deliberately make something that absolutely was not like them. So It's thankless. That's why the tear would roll down my cheek. If you were developing a new drum machine, you are being compared to two machines that you are not trying to emulate necessarily. You are trying to move forward and make a new sound. And you're going to find that the world is both interested and not interested in equal measure in that new sound. And we know also that we can make an 808 and a 909 sound very new and different through judicious use of processing and effects. Shaping a drum machine is an intrinsic part of the sound you actually hear on a record. Don't judge new drum machines based on their raw sound. Give them a fair shake and try them with effects and try them with different processing. And one of my favorites is to combine them with the 808 and the 909. And when I was at that distributor with the drum route, that's what I did. I myself ran an 808 style kit next to it. And I was like, wow, this drum route is awesome because it makes all this other kind of fruity, Latin-y sort of percussion, all this other softer, interesting stuff. It itself sounds amazing with processing. If you distort the drum route, it becomes a whole other thing because that's what you do with an 808 as well. It really illustrated to me that I think that there's a lot of... the only word that I can think of right now is somewhat lazy approaches to judgments where people hear something and take it entirely at face value and don't think about how it will sound when it's been processed. So I do think there's no such thing as bad gear here, that the fact is, did you learn what it was good for? Another brilliant example of this is the Rytm Wolf. That's a device where people hear it and they go, I don't like it because, and this is perfectly exemplified by my friend Matthias Simovic of Inhalt, who told me this, and he's right. He's like, dude, I met Dan from Akai. I met him. And do you know about Dan from Akai? Dan is an industrial guy. He's into industrial and EBM. And if you think about those machines from an industrial kind of EBM sort of vibe, not a house music sort of vibe, then instantly you start to understand why they sounded like they did. They were not designed to be 808s and 909s and make oof doots, house music, techno, Detroit music. That's not what they were designed to do. But our natural proclivity, I think, is to apply this house music lens, this 808 and 909 lens. When you've got this 808 or 909 shape that everything has to fit through, then you need to be careful. You need to consider that everything might have a different use for something else, just like the 303 did, right? The 303, invented as a bassline accompaniment tool. I have my suspicions. I've never spoken to Tadao Kikumoto. I would love to. I suspect in my heart that they understood, their job is to design an instrument and they determine what it sounds like when the knob is completely on one end and completely on the other. That is human determined. It is not an accident. You choose how far the value can be pushed. You can change that. And they allowed it to be pushed as far as it could, which to me says, I think in Hamamatsu, they were creating acid tracks, kind of proto-acid tracks, and were thinking, man, this sounds really cool when it sounds weird when we push it like this. And that is the spirit of this thing as well, that yes, it's not the thing you thought it was. It's not an 808, it's not a 909, and it's intentionally trying to be something wildly different, and that the designers have put in the scope. They were leaving you the little breadcrumbs to push it further and discover, look, here's a new thing I discovered. Isn't that interesting? A perfect example of this is the Neutral Labs Scrooge, a drum machine that I would say almost objectively sounds bad. I mean that with the greatest of love and respect and admiration and cap doffing, because this could not sound less like an 808 or a 909 if it tried. And like the drum brute, I think is really interesting, really valuable, has something to say and contribute. And also works beautifully with an 808 and a 909 combined with it, because it makes all these other sounds that those fat fundamentals you can have an 808 and a 909 supply the body, the sort of core of the sound, a slight sort of signpost for us to attach ourselves to that we understand. And then on top of that, you can then build some really weird stuff on top of the scaffolding. I should also say, I am not one of these people who he says that the 808 and the 909 are boring. I think that's also really important to state, is that I love the sound of those machines and I don't want them to go away. And I will continue to use the sound of the 808, the 909, the 707 and the 606 for as long as I possibly can. And I will find new ways to affect them, new patterns that they can create, new combinations of them. But I do love those sounds and they do function beautifully. I think to sort of complain about them is just pointless at this point, because you're not going to make them go away. And it's a sort of holier than thouism to say, I'm so psychologically evolved that I put the past away. I don't put any pain in these sounds from 1982. I've moved on. Why don't you? You're chasing ghosts, as it were, in a way. But I don't agree with that. We have a hard enough job in electronic music to come up with completely original anythings. And I think that there is nothing wrong with a slamming drum beat that is made with an 808 and a 909 and deployed correctly, but not necessarily exclusively with that. Then you can murder a dance floor. People dance to these things now as they always did. And it doesn't have to be that you only and exclusively use the sound of the 808 and the 909. In fact, what I'm advocating for here is the fact that there is a whole world of processed, affected, twisted, augmented, layered versions of these sounds that you can take full advantage of. That's the joy of them, is that even after 40 years, we're still discovering new ways to work with a certain sound. And that we can use them some of the time and not all of the time necessarily. But I think I am also in this video attempting to unpack a kind of, we are at risk of not being as open-minded as we can be to new versions, to the new 909, to the new 808. And I have heard some machines, the most notable of which was the Electron Analog Rytm. When I tried a Rytm, I remember thinking these exact words. I remember where I was. I was stood at NAMM. I was in like the big hall. And I remember listening to it and going, this sounds like, it sounded like hearing the 808 for the first time. The Rytm sounded like, had that same kind of instantly arresting sound where you were like, what is this? Whoa, this is a thing. My body is responding to this almost viscerally. It commands me. That's how it felt. And that is not a very regular thing. And that's the sort of my worry. Also, what was that? There's an MFB drum machine that I tried. It was the MFB Tanzbar 2. That thing, I heard at Super Booth. I remember where I was, stood on the little mezzanine. I remember that. That sounded off the hook. It sounded amazing. And so it is possible. It is possible for us to move on from these things. But what I guess I'm saying is it's okay not to. And it's okay to. It's okay to say goodbye to these old sounds, and it's okay to still hold on to them and deploy them at different times. There'll always be people who want to be kind of holier than thou, and they're welcome to those thoughts, and they can retain them. They can keep them. I personally will be here enjoying the hell out of any machine that lets me explore aspects of this in a way that is immediate and joyful. This is the Roland TR-8. And if you are excited by the TR-1000, but do not have 2,239 or 300 pounds going spare, which is understandable, that's just what it costs. This is about £250 to buy the one that's got the 7x7 expansion, which is the expansion that adds like the 727 and maybe it did add the 707, but you want the one with the expander preloaded. I got this for £250 with the expander preloaded. This is a fantastic sounding drum machine, and what makes it so amazing are the faders. Lord preserve us. It's the most analog feeling digital drum machine. It's very immediate. It's very fun to play with. And anyone who is put off by its look, well, there are ways around that. You could spray it. You know, there are overlays. There's a synth overlay thing you can do, including I've seen people desolder all of the green LEDs and replace them with orange surface mount ones. But I would invite you to close your eyes and get over the look, because you've missed something. If you think this is bad, I don't know what is good. This is one of the best things Roland ever made. It's amazing. It's so much fun. And it's an 808, a 909, a 707, a 606, 727, all in one. Doot, doot, even with the sparkle chime. It's great. And so you can combine this, you can add effects to it. It has nice effects built in. Well, they're okay. And you can turn it into a storming, tough sounding thing. Play it through a big system. It slams. It's great. And so, yeah, I will continue to chase the ghosts in whatever form I find them, from this to the System 8880 to the Tip Top 808 drums to my DIN Sync Re-808 that I have to build. Wish me luck with that one. To maybe someday a TR-1000. And I'll continue to use these sounds, and I'll appreciate the fact that I can affect them, I can compress them, and I can layer them with other things, and hopefully find a new sound within this old sound. And I will also be open-minded to the possibility that there is an 808 and a 909 yet to be discovered. A drum machine whose impact on music could be just as profound and lead us into another 40 years of musical discovery within the sound palette that has been so cleverly created. So let's go to it and find that sound. Thanks.